right. We welcome back Mr. Jim Clifton. He was here last year. We're glad he's back. He is chairman and CEO of Gallup.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to do a little setup here, and then my colleague's going to show some slides, some surveys that we've done of kids. So this guy, one of the kids I mentor is comes from a real low-income family in Philadelphia. Neighborhood got too dangerous, so he moved to Washington. I don't know, it must be really dangerous there. But and he's dealt kind of the two typical bad hand of father incarcerated and all that kind of thing. But anyway, we're sitting there and I say to him, let's say that it's 5 or 10 years from now and you are so successful, you're making so much money, you look and you go, I just can't believe I made it here. I said, how much money are you making? I needed to know what he and I were going to do together. I needed to know the expectation. How much money do you think he said? $80,000 bucks. We ought to be, if he and I can't get him 80,000 bucks, then something's wrong with this country. You know, middle class wage is between about 50 and 80. He's going through college, everything's going to work out just right. I wanted to make that point because when you see these people from the government talking, and they're talking about 5% unemployment, they always forget to tell you something. That includes all those crappy part-time jobs. So the full-time jobs are sliding out the bottom and they never say it. And so the 5% is a gross misrepresentation of what's actually out there. Here's the part you'll never hear. The total number of full-time jobs between 55 and 85,000 as a percent of the population is the smallest it's been in 40 years. This is the worst job market we've ever had because my guy Rashawn and everybody else, they don't want those $10 an hour jobs. They want a real job. So what do we do to fix that? I want to tell you one other thing too. I'm trying to set this up, but so the guy that founded our company, Dr. Gallup, he was an academic, but he spent his whole life trying to figure out what the will of America is. What's the great American dream? But over the years, it's been peace, freedom, and to have a family. So if you said, we can only go back 80 years, but if you said, what's the great American dream? What do people want? That's what. So if you're my age, you didn't want to go to Vietnam, you wanted freedom, and you wanted to have a family and a station wagon and take a vacation to Estes Park or something like that. That was the great American dream. Now it's changed. But as leaders, you need to know this. And when I tell you what the change is, it's going to sound subtle. It's a huge sociological shift. It went from peace, freedom, having a family. It's none of those three anymore. Now it's having a good job. And a good job is not an $8 an hour job at some kind of retail place. Those jobs are necessary and all of that. But it's to have 35 plus hours, and it's with a paycheck for an organization with consistent work. That's what we have too few of. Millennials are different than people my age. I went to college, and all I wanted was a salary for $20,000. And I didn't care what I sold or what I did. Rubber hose, cigarettes, whatever it is, I'll do it. Because the great American dream was peace and to have a family. You have a family and not have to go to Vietnam. You see, now it's changed. And it changes the whole fabric. You know millennials. They get married later in life, or they don't get married at all. Marriage rates are the lowest they've ever been. Here's another one. When I was growing up, this happened in just this old man's life, women globally were averaging 5 kids marriage, 5 children. In my lifetime, it's gone down to 2.5. In America, it's down below 2 because women have fewer children or they don't have any children at all. But you see how this great American dream, but for us as leaders, it means something else too. Not only have all the demographics changed because of that will, but when somebody that we're working with comes onto our workplace, they're asking a whole different question. And that is, what's my job? Do you consider my strengths? Are you going to give me meaningful work? Because now a job is my life. It wasn't for Jim's baby boomer time, but now if my job doesn't have meaning, my life doesn't have meaning. And so we have a whole different will that we have to fill. Okay. The country's energy is slowing down. And so some of us, John and I, we've been looking, but new businesses aren't starting. And so they're at an all-time low. They've been crashing. You used to have about 500,000 would start, 400,000 would go broke or go out of business. Now those lines have crossed. Now we have 500,000 going broke and 400,000 starting. So that's not good. So you say, what do we do to get more good jobs? Millennials have to start businesses, or this whole thing doesn't work out right. I noticed these guys said get government jobs. How do you do that? What's that? That's just taxes. Somehow we got to start businesses from the hearts and minds of kids, and we have a few slides on that. I put a group together at Gallup. We did a big predictive analytics piece on how many people have the kind of, what would you say, the unusual gift that God puts in us to start, the resilience to start a company and build it. And this is so important, but the answer is 5 in 1,000. So when you see 1,000 kids, by the way, you can line them up by speed, you can line them up by IQ, you can line them up by how well they can sing a song. We can't line them up by their likelihood to start a company. There's 15 million kids in high school right now. If you do 0.5 of that, it means 75,000. There's 75,000 millennials right now that can build businesses of any size. There's just no limits. If you said, how many Steve Jobs are there? The most important part of that study was that there's no difference between blacks, whites, Hispanics, men, or the big one is men and women. God was very egalitarian in handing out that particular gift. So if you said, what can we do to fix jobs as fast as we possibly can? 15 million kids in high school, 0.5, 75,000. It means that there's 10,000 young blacks. It means that there's 5,000 young black males that can build businesses of any kind. You know what the problem is? We don't know who they are. If they could sing a song, we know who they were. If they had high IQ, we find all those too. If they can shoot a basketball or play football, whatever, we know where they all are, but somehow we got to find them. And when we do, for as much as the country economy and jobs are grinding down, I think we've done harder things as Americans, but we can really fix this. And John and I talk about this. The fix is free. It doesn't take money. These guys are talking about hundreds of $billions of, just pretend jobs. We can fix it ourselves. I'm just going to stop right here. I'm going to introduce my colleague, Valerie Calderon, and she's going to give you the update of Hearts and Minds of maybe 15 million kids. Thank you very much.
This is quite the convening of thought leaders and difference makers, and I'll take a difference maker right alongside a thought leader any day. So I'm really excited to share with you the results of the Gallup Hope Index. The Gallup Hope Index is a survey of students who are in grades 5 through 12, and it's a great big vision, and it won't surprise you that this great big vision came from John Hope Bryant and Jim Clifton. Now, their hope was to really tap into the hearts and minds of the nation's youth to really get a sense about their economic energy. We wanted to dig into their entrepreneurial and innovation aspiration, say that 10 times fast, their entrepreneurial and innovation aspiration. We wanted to get a read on whether they had access to the resources that they need in order to be successful in their venture. We also wanted to gauge a little bit about their career and financial literacy. Do they have the understanding about how the economy works in a sufficient way in order to be successful in the future? Now, as we go to the next slide, I'm going to share with you a little secret. When you field a survey like the Gallup Hope Index, which has about 10 questions, you really shouldn't play favorites with your items. But I'm going to give away the secret. I have a couple of items on this survey that are my favorites. And these are those. Next slide, please. I plan to start my own business, and I will invent something that changes the world. Now let me tell you why I love these items. These are on an agree-disagree scale for students to respond to, and here's why I love them. Because we're not asking students if they think they might, or it would be really good if I could. We're asking them whether they plan to start their own business. And then we're giving this statement, I will invent something, and you can see we could have put a period at the end of that, and we would have had a nice sentence, but I don't think we would have had a really great item. But I love that we add, I will invent something that changes the world. You see, we kind of upped the ante on the degree of difficulty piece about these questions. And here's what I think is really hopeful about the data. We have 4 in 10 kids who agree with these statements. I'm feeling feeling pretty good about the future to know there's 40% of kids out there in grades 5 through 12 that are thinking, hey, I could do this. Now, before we go to the next slide, we don't want to give away the punchline, little audience participation. I have teaching in my background, and I work with our education research team, so allow me a little audience participation. Would you guess that the level of aspiration increases as students get older? Or would you guess that aspiration around these two items, as we're measuring them, decreases as students get older? So we'll do the like button. So like, if you think aspiration increases as students get older. Any takers on aspiration increases? How about unlike? Aspiration goes down as students get older. I regret to inform you that yes, the nays have it around this. So aspiration around these two items does tend to decrease as students get older. So by high school, we don't have as many students, and we can go to the next slide to show that. And you can see that we have this gap between older students and younger students. So about half of students who are in grades 5 through 8 agree with these statements, but just 3 in 10 older students do. Now, I'm absolutely willing to concede that as students get older, their vision gets maybe a little bit broader, and they have talents and strengths and things that they want to accomplish, and they certainly can choose those, and we want to absolutely honor students landing in their very best job one day that honors what they do best and that they're engaged and excited about. But what's not okay is as students progress through school, to have them feel like I don't have the access to the things that I need to be successful around these ventures. What we don't want to have happen is for students who are really wired up, as Jim said, and we find those freakishly gifted kids who could start a business that not only is great for them, but employs others and is great for their community. We don't want to lose them to not having the right opportunities, the right mentorship, the right bridges to that success. Now, not only are we measuring aspiration, we are again also measuring whether we think students have access to the information they need. And on the next slide, you can see a little bit of that information that we gain from our students. We are asking them whether they have access to the information they need in schools about how to start and how to run a business. And we find that a little under half of students say that they do. Now, it won't surprise you on this next slide. Hopefully we have a clicker that can fast forward so you can actually see the pretty picture. My team worked hard to get those good pictures. So it's a little less than half of students say that their school teaches them how to start and run a business. Now, it won't surprise you to know that older students are a little bit better around this than younger students. But again, I have some concern about that. So there's a little bit of gap around that aspiration, the access to the information they need. We really need to work hard in our schools, not only to train students up well for the standardized tests that they have, but so that they can land in a successful future and have access to the information they need to be successful in the businesses. We really need them to grow for our communities to be healthy. But not only are we asking students about whether they have access to the information they need, we're also asking them about their level of career experience. Now, we're asking a few questions. Whether they have an internship, whether they run their own business, and I have to tell you, I am on the edge of my seat to meet some of those students who are here with us at this forum, who are young business builders already, and they are running their own business. I get to meet one tomorrow. I'm so excited, a Hope Business in the Box grant recipient who has a great idea for business. I met her over the phone, and I get to spend some time with her tomorrow. We're asking students whether they have their own business now, whether they have an internship, or whether they're working at a paid job. Now, it won't surprise you, and you can go ahead and flip forward. These new pieces of the graphics will pop up there. You will find that just a fraction of students are telling us that they have access to work experience. So just 3% of kids are saying they run their own business. So maybe that's a great big question for a young person, but we need to multiply that and give them opportunities sooner rather than later. And here's why I think we need to do that, and we need to do it more often and more intentionally. We're doing some higher education research. So we're looking at some of the things in the higher education space and experiences there that have links to how people feel about their jobs when they're older, whether they're engaged with their work and whether they have high well-being. We are finding that for folks who in college said that they had experience applying what they're learning in class, not so surprisingly, they're more engaged with the work that they're in as alums later. So I think it stands to reason that if we can expose students earlier and sooner, and you can go ahead and forward to the next slide, you will find that students can land in that job where they're that perfect fit. They get exposed sooner, getting to practice the talents and the things and the strengths that they have and the things that they do best sooner. And you can go ahead and fast forward to the next slide. We have lots of graphics for you. Not only are we measuring whether students have experience, access to information they need, and have great aspirations for the future, and one more time, friends with the PowerPoint, we also are asking them whether they have the financial literacy they need, whether they are empowered financially in order to be successful in their future and land there. So if you're going to run a business, if you're going to land in someone else's good business, we need you to participate not marginally in our economy, but meaningfully and in a healthy way. And we can't afford to leave one student on the margins of our economy. We need all of them in the mainstream. What we find when we ask students is that about 9 in 10 of them make the connection between having more education and having more earning potential. I think that's positive. I'm glad to see that. But like you, I bet you're thinking, and I'm thinking this, but what about the 1 in 10 who haven't yet made that connection? But here's the thing we need to be really mindful of in terms of the connection between education and earning potential, which of course we still see that there is one. But we also know that we've got a crisis in higher education around loan debt that is paralyzing graduates in the workforce. So what we need to do is give students really great information sooner rather than later. One, about what they do very well, and help them have some career literacy, some sense of how can I use what I do very best, my talents and my skills in a place that really aligns with what I'm created to do. Give them that information sooner rather than later. What education do you need to land there well and effectively and meaningfully? So I think we need to do that sooner rather than later so students understand the return on that investment of education. There's so much more to do there. I'm so glad there's thought leaders here that are already thinking through that. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. You can see that we're doing some more around financial literacy, asking students whether their school is teaching them about money and banking. Now again, when we think about degree of difficulty in an item, if we'd have put the period after money, a whole lot more students would have said, sure, yeah, they're teaching me about that. But this is kind of a tough piece when we're asking them about money and banking. Go ahead and fast forward again so we can see the additional graphics. Now we hear a lot, and one more time, we hear a lot about the achievement gap, but we really also need to address this financial literacy gap that we see. If we go to the next slide, and one more time, we're also asking students whether they have the bank account with or credit union account with money in it. And you can see we've got an income gap and we have a white, non-white gap here that's not okay. So we're doing things to address the achievement gap. But what can we do sooner rather than later to help students have practice about how to work, earn, save, spend, and share in a way that's healthy for themselves and awesome for their communities that they live in. You can see that we have students from households with lower income, that gap between those who are from higher income households. We have 6 in 10 from higher income households saying that they have a bank account, whereas just 3 in 10 who are responding to this item telling us that they have a bank account from lower income households. And one more slide, please. Next slide. So when I think about economic energy and what students need to be successful, we've shown you some data and some information kind of at the 30,000-foot view about what America's youth are thinking about in 5th through 12th grade. But we know these data are just a platform for what needs to happen locally. Change in a young person's life happens one student, one relationship, one opportunity at a time. It really is locally that the difference is made in a young person's life. My son, my oldest son, we just sent off to college this year. I promise I won't get choked up this time when I'm telling this story. He's our oldest of 4, and he came home to visit us for Christmas, and I was so excited to hear all of his stories, but one I was particularly excited to listen to was about how he made his first invention. He's 18, he's a freshman, he's a chemical engineering major, and he had an invention his first semester in school. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. So he showed us the prototype. He took it out of his pocket. It's a plastic thingamajig, and he will be absolutely mortified that I could not remember what it is called, but it is used in chem labs to separate gases and analyze them or some fancy thing such as that. And no, I'm not quitting my day job anytime soon. So he invented this, and I was listening to a story and I was thinking through, well, how did he get to the point where already, and he's really interested in sustainable biofuels, so that's his goal, really, to invent something that changes the world one day. That's his interest. And he started out by inventing this small plastic doodad that will be used by the chem lab even this semester, and he'll get to present about his design. And I was listening to a story, and I was thinking about all of the things that happen that allow him to have his very first invention in his field as an 18-year-old in school. And here's the things that happened. Someone opened the door, literally. They opened the lab door and said, "We invite you." He had an invitation. The other thing that they did was they kind of came alongside him and they told him things that he needed to know about the software. Here's how you're going to design your thingamajig with this software. And here's the 3D printer as far as I know. I don't think you'd ever seen a 3D printer before. And here's how you're actually going to make your thing. So they gave him the information that he needed in order to be successful. And of course, all along the way, he had some failures and they gave him feedback about those failures. Your design really needs to be tweaked about this and you could do this. And then at the very end, they were encouraging. They said, "Guess what? You've landed. Here's our prototype. And we're going to print these off, and now we're going to use them in a lab." And he's changing his little chem world in his school a little bit. And one day, I hope he'll change the world a lot. I realized essentially what they did in that process was infuse hope in my son. Now, I have a friend. His name is Shane Lopez, and Dr. Lopez is a hope scientist. I know. Sign me up for that job. All of you are thinking that. A hope scientist. Now, my friend Shane says that hope is having great ideas about the future, but he also says this, not just having good ideas, it's about having the power to make it so. Believing you have the power to make it so. In my son's journey, the folks who invested in him helped him believe that he has the power to make his future dream to change the world through bioenergy a reality. Hope is a very powerful thing. And I encourage each and every one of you to continue to build bridges with young people to instill hope, help them believe that they have the power to make it so. And when you do that, I think that's a pretty good recipe, because when that student grows up and they fulfill their hopes and dreams, guess what they're going to do? They're going to splash hope off on other folks. And I think multiplying hope in young people is a really good way to ignite and sustain economic energy. Thanks, y'all.